Hi, we are going to use the GDB compiler, and this demo is going to show how to separate the class implementation from main, which is what we call the driver program, into the header file .h and the implementation file .cpp. And I had started writing this as a person class, but I realized I think it might make more sense to name it an employee. Just a second here. I'm going to close that window so we get some more screen real estate. And so I'm going to show you a feature also that you can do here on GDB that's kind of nice. So I made this just a bare bones class. I'm going to have a first name and then employee ID. So I thought, well, maybe instead of it being a person class, I would make it an employee class. But what that means is every time I have the word person, I'm going to have to change that to employee. So I'm going to do a find and replace. So I'm going to click on the right over here and I'm going to do a Control F for find, and my find window shows up. I want to find every occasion of person, and if I click the plus sign there, the plus sign, then I can tell it what I want to replace it with, and I want to replace it with employee. Now, if I replaced every single one, that's probably what I want to do, but I'm a little bit cautious, so I like to do these one at a time. So I'm going to find first. So let me see if I can run this, and so I can find. It says there's 3 of 12, so find next. If I arrow to the right, there's person, and I'm going to hit replace, and it goes to the next one. I'm going to hit replace. Now there, I could actually leave that as person 1. I'm just declaring an employee to be person 1, or I could replace it with employee. That, and same thing here, and again and again. I'm not going to, well, I'll go ahead and change those, and then I'm going to see if I can find, I think there's one more at least, and there it is. So I hit replace, and a couple more on the constructor, person, and I think that's it. So that's a nice little feature if you need to kind of make some changes. If you decide to change a variable name or something, you can do that, find and replace. And in order to open that up, I did a Control F to begin. Now, what I'm going to do with this particular example right now is show you how to separate out, like we did on Visual Studio, this program into a header file and an implementation file. So in GDB, what you do is just click on New File, and this one's going to become employee.h, and I'm going to then have also an employee.cpp. So I need to click on New File, and I want this one to be employee.cpp. So the header file is where we are going to define our instance variables, and when I take this from a full-blown class or a class that's written above main, I'm going to cut all of that code, Control X. I'm going to go ahead and place it in employee.h for now, but I don't need it all in employee.h. The only thing I need there's a couple of things I need to do in employee.h. This is my header file, and a header file contains basically all the prototypes for the class. You can use the lines pound, if, and def. If not defined is what that stands for. Then employee underscore h. If it's not defined, then we define it, is what that stands for, employee underscore h. And then you would wrap it into at the end, you would do pound end if after you wrote all your code in between there. Okay. However, it is pretty common right now that you replace these 3 lines of code with something called pound pragma once. That's kind of the new industry standard. I don't actually know exactly what pragma stands for. I'd have to go look it up, but that takes and replaces the pound if not defined. And so then I need my private data, and then I need only the prototype lines for my methods. Now, because I'm not just creating this one from scratch, because I took it from main, I am going to copy all of these methods I'm going to do a Control C, and I'm going to paste them over to employee.cpp with a Control V, and then I'll come back to that. In my header file, the only thing that I need here is the prototype lines. So I'm going to just do employee, that's my constructor, get name, get first name, returns a string, get employee ID, returns an integer, set first name, etc. So these are just going to be my prototypes, and they are public methods. So we generally will have them all together. And actually I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get this set up. And notice then at the very end the curly brace semicolon here. And then I'm going to click Beautify, and it cleans up the spacing for me. Most of it. I'm going to clean up some blank spaces in between here. You probably hear me call that white space. And we're getting a little bit closer. There is a shortcut for indenting all of this. And I'm just going to, my constructor has the beginning and ending brace. I'm going to just use the prototype line and see if that will clean things up a little bit more. Not quite. What I want to do is tab all of these in, and I think there's a shortcut. If I go over here to the icon, if I look for a shortcut to insert everything or indent, I believe if I look, there is a shortcut to indent everything. I think it's Control. Find next. Nope. Block indent. Control, and then it looks like the plus a right bracket. I'm going to see if that works. Control right bracket, and it did not work for me. So that's alright. We'll just fix it up just a little bit. But what I wanted to show you there was that shortcut menu, because there's some things that you can find on that shortcut menu that might help. Okay, we are partially in business here. I think we are okay with this. Don't forget, I already mentioned it, but don't forget the semicolon at the end of the class. And then we're going to go to employee.cpp. There's a couple of things that have to happen here. Number one, we have to pound include the, in quotes, employee.h. And then we also have to tell it that every single one of these methods belongs with employee by putting in the name of the class, colon, colon, and that colon, colon is what we call a scope resolution operator. So that symbol is a scope resolution operator, and it's necessary to identify that this particular method, which is the constructor, belongs to this particular class. So the scope for this method is this class, and it might help if I were to spell it correctly. So employee. So now that has to happen on every single method. So I'm going to copy, Control C, and after the data type and before the name, we are going to put in that scope resolution operator, the name of the class plus the scope resolution operator, so that we get this to work. And that is also done or included on the D constructor. If you haven't started putting a D constructor into your programs, you need to. Okay. Now the rest of this should be set up. We are going to have some errors when we run, I believe. So let's go ahead and try it. And the first error that we get is employee was not declared in this scope. So if I go back, that's in my main program, and that makes sense because I have not told it, let me go back, I have not told it to use employee.h. So I'm going to put in quotes, pound include, and then quotes, employee.h. So it couldn't, that's one of the reasons that that error message might show up. It couldn't find an employee because it can't find a definition because I didn't tell it what header file to use. We're going to try it again, and we will probably have to go through several error messages. I am on purpose just kind of doing this on the fly so you can see some of the error messages that we get. Now this one says we are missing a terminating character, and if I look, it should tell me what line it's on. Right here, maybe? Or I think sometimes you can double click on it and it will take you to that error, but it is not happening in this compiler. So if I go back and I look, it is missing a symbol. I found that right bracket, it's on the pound include string up here, is what it was missing. I don't know if that will take care of the rest of the errors. And we keep going. So now this one says string does not name a type, string first name. And so on this one I have pound include string here. I believe what's happening here is it might need the pound include string in our header file, because it says the error string does not name a type. If I scroll down, we have some other issues going on with strings, because this is invalid conversion from character to int. I don't know what else is going on. String does not name a type here, so we're going to have to investigate this. I have pound include string here, I have pound include IOStream, and I have using namespace standard, but in this particular file I don't have a pound include string. I'm going to try that, and I may or may not need a using namespace standard. I'm going to see if that clears up some of the errors. We will see what happens, and that took care of it. So here's what's happening, is that this pound include string is necessary in this program along with using namespace standard. Actually, let me comment that out and see if we need it. And yes, it gives us an error. I would be curious to know also if I comment out pound include string if it would work. It might just need the using namespace. Nope, it needs both. So what's happening here is I am not using, well, there's a couple of things. I need to include these two statements if I do not write my code where I say I'm going to use the standard library std : string. If I write my code with the standard library : string, which again is your scope resolution operator, so it's saying that you're going to pull string from the standard template library. If I rewrite my code like this at this level, it's probably going to yell at me because I don't have that here in employee. So let me make those changes also. I'm going to copy this std, if I type it correctly, : string, copy that, and we are going to put that into your employee, every place we have the keyword string. I went ahead and copied it over and took out some errors because I had duplicated the word string to get this to execute using this std in front of anything that's from the standard template library. So now once I did that, the other things I needed to do, I keep the pound include employee.h. I shouldn't need any other pound includes in this file, because what that does, pound include employee.h, is it copies over this employee.h. I no longer need the using namespace standard, but I do still need string for this code here to execute. And then in main, I decided that I was also going to use the format for std : on my outputs, my couts, and my console, and then my endls. And so if you use that naming convention, which is actually pretty common in industry to use, and then you comment out using namespace standard. Let's try that again. Maybe I don't need to comment it out in main. Then my program went ahead and executed. I had it Fred changing name, and then it changed the name to Barney because I did a set first name. I can go ahead and beautify this code, straighten that up. I can double check employee.h. Here I do not need the using namespace standard when I use the std then, and etc. So that right there shows you how you can take a class and you separate it into the header file and its implementation file. It showed you with whether you were using the standard template boilerplate library with the scope resolution operator versus not using it. And then it also showed the driver executing this code. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this example. I was going to show some other stuff, but I'm not going to now. And I can make this code available online. That's another thing that I can kind of show you here, is that if you want to save these and submit these as a project, you can just download the files. And then when you download them, okay, I better save first. I would save them all to a single folder, and this is the EmployeeClass project. I should have had it saved a long time ago. But you can download individual files, that code, and so if I go back one level, I'd create a new folder. This was employee, and then you can put all the files that you need in that particular folder and download everything, so then you can upload them. And it's easiest for checking actually if you upload these as separate files instead of a zipped folder. So please upload each of your files individually. The next video is going to show you how to take a class and use it in an array.